I stood frozen in that glass-walled conference room, watching Derek Vaughn's smug smile spread across his face. The entire operations team sat around the polished table, eyes glued to the floor. Nobody wanted to look at me. "Celia Porter, you're finished here," Derek announced, loud enough for half the office to hear through the thin walls. His voice dripped with satisfaction. "Maybe you'll find a company that actually cares about your precious feelings instead of profits." My stomach dropped. After 5 years at Ironclad Industries, this was how it ended? Because I refused to sign off on his latest cost-cutting scheme that would put construction workers at risk? "Derek, I was only doing my job," I said quietly, my voice barely steady. "Those materials won't meet safety standards." He laughed, actually laughed. "Safety standards don't pay the bills, sweetheart. Results do." The room stayed deadly silent. My colleagues, people I'd worked with for years, kept staring at their hands. Nobody spoke up. Nobody defended me. Derek slid a termination letter across the table. "Clean out your desk. Security will escort you out in 1 hour." I picked up the paper with trembling fingers. This couldn't be happening. "Let me tell you how we got here. 5 years ago, I was so excited to join Ironclad Industries. Fresh out of college with my engineering degree, ready to change the world one safe building at a time. The company had a solid reputation, and I genuinely loved what I did. Everything was perfect until 6 months ago, when Derek got promoted to operations manager. The guy was a complete nightmare from day one. He strutted around the office like he owned the place, barking orders and making unreasonable demands. "We need to cut costs by 15%, he'd say during every meeting. "I don't care how you do it, just make it happen." He turned our workplace toxic overnight. People who used to laugh and collaborate suddenly walked on eggshells. Derek made it clear that questioning his decisions was career suicide. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was just under pressure from upper management. Maybe he'd settle in and things would get better. But they didn't. They got worse. Derek seemed to take personal pleasure in pushing people around. He'd publicly embarrass employees over minor mistakes and take credit for everyone else's successes. Still, I kept my head down and focused on my work. That was my first mistake. The first real red flag came during a routine project meeting. We were reviewing delivery reports for a major client, and some of our materials had arrived 3 days late. No big deal. These things happen in construction. But Derek pulled me aside afterward, his eyes cold and calculating. "Celia, I need you to adjust these reports," he said casually, sliding the paperwork across my desk. "Change the delivery date to show they arrived on time." I stared at him in disbelief. "Derek, that's not accurate. The client knows when they received the materials. The client doesn't check every detail. They trust us to handle logistics." His voice stayed calm, but I could see the warning in his expression. "Besides, late deliveries make us look unprofessional." "But it's fraud," I said quietly. Derek's fake smile never wavered. "It's business, Celia. Sometimes we need to massage the numbers to keep everyone happy." I refused. The report stayed accurate. Later that day, he cornered me by the coffee machine. His voice was barely a whisper, but the threat was crystal clear. "You're either a team player or a liability, Celia. Choose wisely." My blood ran cold. But I'd made my choice the moment I got my engineering license. Integrity wasn't negotiable. After that incident, I started paying closer attention to office dynamics. What I discovered made my stomach turn. "Be careful around Derek," my colleague Amy whispered during lunch. "He's already fired 2 people for insubordination. Both of them questioned his methods." Other coworkers shared similar warnings. Derek wasn't respected. He was feared. People did what he wanted because they were terrified of losing their jobs, not because they believed in his leadership. "He's been meeting with suppliers after hours," another colleague confided. "Rumor is he's getting kickbacks for steering contracts their way, even when their materials are subpar." I felt sick. This wasn't just bad management. This was corruption that could get people hurt. That night, I went home and started a detailed log. Every suspicious meeting, every questionable decision, every corner Derek tried to cut. I told myself it was just for documentation purposes, but deep down, I knew I was building a case. If Derek wanted to play dirty, I'd be ready. My engineering training had taught me that preparation prevents disasters. I had no idea how right that lesson would prove to be. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. Derek burst into my office with plans for a massive construction project, a 12-story office building downtown. The client was huge, and landing this contract would mean serious money for Ironclad. I found a supplier who can cut our materials costs by 30%, Derek said, spreading blueprints across my desk. I need you to approve these specifications today. I studied the paperwork and felt my heart sink. The steel grades were completely wrong. These materials might hold up for a few years, but they'd fail under stress. In an earthquake or heavy wind, that building could collapse. Derek, these materials won't meet building codes, I said firmly. The steel grade is too low for a structure this size. Don't be so dramatic, he scoffed. Nobody will know the difference once the building's up. I'll know the difference, and when that building falls down and kills people, it'll be my signature on the approval forms. Derek's mask slipped for a moment, revealing the ugly truth underneath. Fine, if you won't sign off on this, I'll find someone who will. Then find someone else, I said, crossing my arms. Because I won't compromise safety for profit. He stormed out, slamming my office door so hard the windows rattled. Derek's retaliation was swift and brutal. Within days, I found myself completely shut out of important meetings. Project updates that used to come directly to me were suddenly routed through other people. Derek made sure I was the last to know about anything significant. He started spreading poison about me throughout the office. Celia's become difficult to work with, I heard him telling other managers. She's not adapting well to our new efficiency standards. Amy showed me a group chat where Derek was actively bad-mouthing me. She thinks she's better than everyone else, one message read. Self-righteous people like that are toxic to team morale. My workload mysteriously tripled while my access to resources got cut in half. Derek was setting me up to fail, hoping I'd quit on my own. But I wasn't going anywhere. Every petty slight, every deliberate obstacle just made me more determined to outlast him. Don't let him win, Amy whispered during a bathroom conversation where we couldn't be overheard. Half the office is rooting for you, even if they can't say it out loud. I appreciated the support, but I knew the truth. When push came to shove, people would protect their own jobs first. I was fighting this battle alone. That's how we ended up in that glass conference room, with Derek making a public spectacle of destroying my career. He'd called an emergency meeting to discuss the downtown construction project, but it was really just theater. Since Celia refuses to be a team player, Derek announced to the room, we'll be moving forward without her. Permanently. The humiliation was calculated and cruel. He could have fired me privately, but that wouldn't have sent the message he wanted. This was about fear and control. Maybe you'll find a company that cares about feelings over results, he said with a smirk. Though I doubt it. The construction industry has no place for people who can't handle reality. My face burned with embarrassment and rage. 5 years of dedication, countless overtime hours, perfect safety records. None of it mattered to this man. I signed the termination papers with steady hands, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. But inside, I was already planning my comeback. As I walked toward the door, Derek's voice followed me one last time. Security will make sure you don't take anything that doesn't belong to you. I turned back and looked him straight in the eye. Don't worry, Derek. I only take what's mine. I was loading my personal items into my car when a stranger approached me in the parking lot. He was tall, well-dressed, and had the confident bearing of someone used to being in charge. Excuse me, are you Celia Porter? He asked politely. I nodded, wondering if Derek had sent someone to harass me further. I'm Cole Brennan, CEO of Summit Steelworks, he said, extending his hand. I was inside for a supplier meeting when I witnessed your departure. Summit Steelworks, Derek's biggest competitor. My heart started racing. I heard you refused to sign off on substandard materials, Cole continued. That takes courage in this industry. It shouldn't, I replied bitterly. It should just be common sense. Cole smiled. Exactly what I was hoping you'd say. I have a proposition for you, Celia. How would you like to come work for a company that actually values integrity? I stared at him in shock. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a chance to do things the right way, he said. You know Ironclad's operations better than anyone. You could help Summit compete fairly and win. My mind was spinning. Was this really happening? Think about it, Cole said, handing me his business card. Call me when you're ready to show Derek Vaughn what real engineering looks like. Starting at Summit Steelworks felt like stepping into a completely different world. The office had natural light, people actually smiled, and nobody looked terrified to speak up during meetings. Cole gave me a tour on my first day, introducing me as the new senior project engineer. Celia comes to us from Ironclad, he announced to the team. She's going to help us raise our game. The work environment was everything Ironclad should have been. Cole encouraged questions, welcomed different perspectives, and actually listened when people raised concerns about projects. I have one simple rule, Cole told me during our first one-on-one meeting. We do things right, even if it costs more up front. Quality always wins in the long run. It was exactly what I needed to hear after months of Derek's corner-cutting madness. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't still burning from the humiliation. Derek had tried to destroy my reputation and my career. The professional in me wanted to move on, but the human in me wanted payback. Ironclad's been undercutting us for years, Cole mentioned casually. If you ever have insights that could help us compete more effectively, I'm all ears. I smiled. Maybe I could have both, professional redemption and personal satisfaction. That night, I organized all my notes from Ironclad. I wasn't planning to steal trade secrets or do anything illegal, but I had 5 years of insights into Derek's patterns, his shortcuts, and his weaknesses. The more I studied my documentation, the clearer Derek's strategy became. He won contracts by promising impossible timelines and rock-bottom prices, then cut corners to make the numbers work. He counted on clients not understanding the technical details well enough to catch the deception. It was brilliant in a twisted way, but it had one fatal flaw. It was built on lies. And lies have a way of catching up with you. I spent hours drafting a competitive analysis for Summit. Nothing confidential, just strategic insights about how we could position ourselves as the honest alternative. While Derek was racing to the bottom, we could compete by offering transparency and quality. This is excellent work, Cole said after reviewing my report. You've identified exactly where Ironclad is vulnerable. Derek's entire business model depends on clients not knowing what they're really getting, I explained. If we show them what quality actually looks like, the choice becomes obvious. Cole leaned back in his chair, grinning. Celia, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful partnership. Our first opportunity came sooner than expected. A major hotel chain was taking bids for a new flagship location, and I knew Derek had his eye on the contract. It was exactly the type of project where his corner cutting would be most dangerous. Lots of people, high visibility, zero margin for error. I rewrote Summit's proposal from scratch, highlighting our commitment to exceeding safety standards, rather than just meeting them. Instead of competing on price alone, we emphasized the long-term value of quality construction. Why should we choose Summit over Ironclad? The client asked during our presentation. Because when you put your name on a building, you want it to still be standing in 50 years, I replied confidently. Our materials and methods ensure that happens. The client was impressed. More importantly, they started asking tough questions about other bidders' specifications. Questions Derek wouldn't be able to answer honestly. 3 days later, Cole burst into my office with a huge grin. We got it. The hotel contract is ours. That night, Derek called my personal cell phone. His voice was tight with barely controlled anger. You think you're so smart, don't you? He hissed. Turning my own industry against me. I didn't turn anyone against you, Derek, I replied calmly. You did that yourself. Losing the hotel contract sent Derek into a downward spiral. According to Amy, who still texted me updates, he was pushing his remaining staff harder than ever. Projects that should have taken weeks were being rushed through in days. He's completely lost it, Amy wrote. Yesterday, he screamed at Jake for asking about load calculations. Said we don't have time for unnecessary engineering. The inevitable happened 2 weeks later. A construction crew working on one of Derek's projects reported serious structural issues. The steel beams were showing stress fractures that shouldn't appear for years, if ever. OSHA launched an investigation immediately. Word spread through the industry like wildfire. If regulatory agencies were sniffing around Ironclad, something was seriously wrong. Amy's next text made me smile. Derek's having panic attacks. He keeps asking if anyone's been talking to competitors. I told him we're all too busy fixing his mistakes to gossip. Cole found me reading the news reports and raised an eyebrow. Karma works fast in this business, he said. Should we position Summit as the ethical alternative in our marketing? Absolutely, I replied. But let's let our work speak for itself. Quality doesn't need to shout. Derek was self-destructing beautifully. All I had to do was stay out of his way. My former colleagues were quietly reaching out more often now. Not for corporate espionage, just frustrated employees venting to a friend who understood their situation. But their complaints painted a clear picture of Derek's mounting problems. The supplier he was getting kickbacks from got audited, one colleague confided during lunch. Turns out they were using counterfeit steel certifications. Derek's scrambling to cover his tracks. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Derek's cost savings weren't just about cutting corners, they were about deliberate fraud. What should we do? My former teammate asked nervously. We don't want to go down with him. Document everything, I advised. And if investigators ask questions, tell the truth. Your professional reputation is worth more than any loyalty to Derek. Meanwhile, Summit was thriving. Cole approved a marketing campaign emphasizing our transparency and quality standards. We weren't attacking Ironclad directly. We were just showcasing what ethical engineering looked like. The contrast was stark. While Derek was dodging regulators and scrambling to explain his shortcuts, Summit was winning awards for construction excellence. Funny how doing things right turns out to be good for business, Cole observed during our weekly planning meeting. Derek's behavior became increasingly erratic as more clients jumped ship. According to industry gossip, he'd started showing up uninvited to competitor meetings, trying to poach back lost business. The breaking point came at a major trade conference where I was presenting Summit's latest safety innovations. Halfway through my presentation about quality control standards, Derek burst through the back doors. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced loudly, I need to address some serious accusations being spread by a disgruntled former employee. The room went dead silent. Every head turned to look at him, then back at me. I could feel the tension crackling through the air. Derek, this isn't the appropriate venue. The conference moderator started. No, this is exactly the right venue, Derek interrupted, striding down the aisle toward the stage. Celia Porter was fired for incompetence, and now she's trying to sabotage my company with lies and rumors. My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice steady. I've never shared any confidential information, Derek. The only thing I've shared is how to do things the right way. The audience murmured approvingly. Derek's face turned red as he realized he'd walked into a trap. Derek's public meltdown continued for several agonizing minutes. He accused me of stealing trade secrets, poaching clients, and running a smear campaign against Ironclad. The more he talked, the more unhinged he sounded. She's been feeding information to Summit Steelworks, he shouted, pointing an accusatory finger at me. It's corporate espionage. I waited for him to finish, then responded with calm professionalism that made his hysteria look even worse by comparison. Derek, I understand you're under pressure, I said gently, but everything Summit has accomplished was achieved through honest work and transparent practices. If that threatens your business model, perhaps you should reconsider your approach. The audience burst into spontaneous applause. Derek stood there, red-faced and breathing heavily, as hundreds of industry professionals openly showed their support for me over him. This isn't over, he hissed, then stormed toward the exit. Cole appeared at my elbow as Derek disappeared through the doors. That, he said quietly, was the sound of a man destroying his own reputation. The rest of my presentation went perfectly. Afterward, dozens of potential clients approached our booth, specifically mentioning they were looking for alternatives to Ironclad. Derek had just handed us his entire customer base. The regulatory investigation into Ironclad accelerated after Derek's public breakdown. Apparently, his erratic behavior had raised red flags with investigators who were already looking into the structural problems at his construction sites. Then the bombshell dropped. Someone leaked internal ironclad emails to the construction trade press. Emails Derek had written himself, detailing exactly how he planned to cut corners on various projects. "Can you believe this?" Cole said, showing me the headline. Ironclad CEO's own words expose safety cover-up. The leaked emails were devastating. Derek had written explicit instructions to substitute cheaper materials without client knowledge and expedite inspections through whatever means necessary. His own words proved he knew exactly what he was doing. Who would have access to Derek's private emails? I wondered aloud. Someone with administrative privileges, Cole replied. Someone who was tired of covering for him. I had my suspicions about who the whistleblower might be, but I kept them to myself. What mattered was that the truth was finally coming to light. OSHA announced they were expanding their investigation to include potential criminal charges. Derek's house of cards was collapsing, and this time he couldn't blame anyone else. The final domino fell when Megacorp's Construction, Ironclad's largest client, announced they were terminating their relationship with Derek's company due to fundamental concerns about integrity and safety standards. Cole called me into his office with the biggest grin I'd ever seen on his face. "Guess who just signed an exclusive contract with Megacorp?" he announced, sliding the paperwork across his desk. I stared at the documents in disbelief. This was Ironclad's bread-and-butter client, worth millions in annual revenue. "They specifically requested you as the project lead," Cole continued. "Apparently, your reputation for ethical engineering has spread throughout the industry." That night, I celebrated with takeout Chinese food and a bottle of wine. 5 months ago, Derek had humiliated me in front of my colleagues and tried to destroy my career. Now, his biggest client was specifically asking for me by name. But my victory celebration was interrupted by an unexpected phone call. The caller ID showed Derek's personal number. "Celia?" His voice was barely a whisper. I need to talk to you." "Derek? It's almost midnight. What do you want?" "Please," he said, and I could hear desperation creeping into his tone. "Just 5 minutes, I'm begging you." Derek's voice was shaking as he spoke. The arrogant bully who had fired me 6 months ago was gone, replaced by a broken man facing the collapse of everything he'd built. "I know you hate me," he said quietly. "I deserve it, but I'm asking you to help me save my company." "Your company?" I replied coldly. "The same company you fired me from for refusing to compromise safety?" "I made mistakes," Derek admitted. "Serious mistakes, but there are good people at Ironclad who don't deserve to lose their jobs because of my stupidity." I listened to him plead for several minutes. He offered me everything: money, equity, complete control over operations. He was desperate enough to promise me anything if I'd just make one phone call to Megacorp on his behalf. "You're the only one they'll listen to," he said. "You could save everyone's job with a single conversation." Part of me felt genuine pity for him. Derek had destroyed his own life through greed and arrogance, and now he was facing the consequences. But a bigger part of me remembered sitting in that conference room, watching him humiliate me in front of my colleagues just to prove a point. "I'll consider it," I said finally. I let Derek twist in the wind for exactly 24 hours before calling him back. When he answered on the first ring, I could hear the desperate hope in his voice. "Celia? Did you talk to them? What did they say?" "Derek," I said calmly, "I've given your request a lot of thought." "And," he pressed eagerly, "and I've decided that I only work for people who do things the right way." The silence stretched for several long seconds before Derek's voice cracked. "Celia, please, I'm admitting I was wrong. I need you." Those were the words I'd been waiting to hear for months. The man who had called me a liability, who had mocked my commitment to safety, who had fired me for having principles, he needed me. "You had your chance to do things right, Derek," I replied. "You chose profits over people. Now you get to live with that choice." I hung up the phone and immediately blocked his number. 30 minutes later, the local business news reported that Ironclad Industries' board of directors had forced Derek Vaughn to resign, effective immediately. Justice had finally been served. Derek's resignation became the lead story in every construction industry publication. "Disgraced CEO steps down amid safety scandal" was typical of the headlines splashed across trade websites and professional forums. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from former ironclad colleagues. Most were celebrating Derek's downfall, but a few expressed genuine concern about their jobs and futures. "Thank you for standing up when none of us could," Amy texted. "You gave us permission to tell the truth." Another former colleague called to tell me that Derek's resignation had triggered a complete management overhaul at Ironclad. "They're bringing in new leadership focused on rebuilding the company's reputation," he explained. "Your name keeps coming up as an example of what engineering integrity looks like." The professional vindication felt amazing, but it was the personal messages that really touched my heart. Construction workers from various job sites sent photos and videos thanking me for prioritizing their safety over corporate profits. "Because of people like you, I get to go home to my family every night," one ironworker wrote. That's when I realized this was never really about Derek or revenge. It was about proving that doing the right thing still mattered in a world that seemed to reward shortcuts and corruption. A few weeks later, I drove back to my old office building to pick up some personal items I'd forgotten in storage. The security guard recognized me and waved me through with a smile. "Good to see you again, Celia," he said warmly. "Heard you're doing great things over at Summit." The ironclad offices felt smaller than I remembered, and strangely quiet. Several cubicles sat empty, evidence of the mass exodus that followed Derek's resignation. I stopped by my old workstation, now occupied by a nervous-looking recent graduate who was trying to make sense of Derek's chaotic filing system. "Need any help?" I offered. "You're Celia Porter," he exclaimed. "Everyone here talks about you. They say you're the reason this place is finally getting cleaned up." I smiled and spent a few minutes helping him organize the safety documentation that Derek had let fall into complete disarray. On my way out, I walked past Derek's former office. The door stood open, revealing an empty room stripped of all personality. His motivational posters about winning at any cost had been replaced with OSHA safety guidelines. It was perfectly symbolic of his downfall. Cole called me into his office on a Friday afternoon, wearing the kind of expression that meant big news was coming. "Celia, I have something important to discuss with you," he began formally, then broke into a huge grin. "How would you feel about becoming Summit's new Vice President of Operations?" I nearly fell out of my chair. "Cole, I've only been here 6 months. 6 months during which you've transformed our entire approach to client relations," he interrupted. "We've landed more new contracts in the past quarter than in the previous 2 years combined. The promotion came with a substantial salary increase, equity in the company, and most importantly, the authority to implement company-wide safety standards that would become the industry benchmark. I'm not promoting you because you helped us beat Ironclad," Cole clarified. "I'm promoting you because you've proven that doing things the right way is actually the most profitable approach in the long run." That evening, I called my parents to share the good news. My mother cried happy tears, and my father, a construction worker himself, said he was proud that I'd stood up for people like him. "The world needs more engineers with your backbone," he said. It was the best compliment I'd ever received. The National Construction Safety Conference invited me to give the keynote speech about ethical leadership in engineering. Standing on that stage, looking out at hundreds of industry professionals, I felt the weight of responsibility and opportunity. "Safety isn't a luxury," I told the audience. "It's not something we add when budgets allow or when clients specifically request it. Safety is the foundation that everything else is built on." The speech focused on the choices every professional faces between doing what's easy and doing what's right. I talked about the courage required to say no to powerful people when lives are at stake. True leadership isn't about having all the answers, I concluded. It's about asking the right questions, especially when those questions are uncomfortable. The standing ovation lasted several minutes. Afterward, dozens of people approached to share their own stories of workplace pressure and ethical dilemmas. But the most meaningful moment came when I spotted a familiar figure in the back of the auditorium. Derek sat alone in the last row, looking older and more defeated than I'd ever seen him. Our eyes met for a brief moment before he looked away in shame. After my speech, Derek waited by the conference exit like he was gathering courage for something difficult. When I finally emerged from the crowd of well-wishers, he stepped forward hesitantly. "Celia," he said quietly, "could I have just 1 minute?" I considered ignoring him, but curiosity won out. We moved to a quiet corner where we couldn't be overheard. "I want to apologize," Derek said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not because I want something from you, but because you deserve to hear it. I was wrong about everything." His apology was surprisingly genuine. He admitted to letting greed cloud his judgment and acknowledged that his actions had put innocent people at risk. "I've been seeing a counselor," he continued, "trying to understand how I became someone I don't recognize. Your speech tonight, it reminded me of the engineer I used to be before ambition poisoned everything." I listened without interrupting, watching this broken man try to rebuild some small piece of his dignity. "I hope you can forgive me someday," Derek concluded, "but I understand if you can't." I looked at him for a long moment, this person who had caused me so much pain and anger. "I hope you learn from this, Derek," I said finally. "But we're done." I walked away, leaving him standing there speechless. Driving home that night, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me to this point. A year ago, I was a mid-level engineer, just trying to do good work and stay out of trouble. Derek's betrayal had shattered my comfortable world, but it also forced me to discover strengths I didn't know I possessed. Standing up to him had been terrifying, but it taught me that integrity isn't just about following rules. It's about having the courage to enforce them when others won't. The success at Summit, the industry recognition, even Derek's downfall. None of it would have happened if I'd just kept my head down and signed those safety waivers. Sometimes the hardest choice turns out to be the one that sets you free. My phone buzzed with a text from Cole. "Saw your speech online. Brilliant as always. Ready to change the industry?" I smiled and typed back, "Let's build something better." Because that's what this story was really about. Not revenge or proving a point, but showing that there was a better way to do business. Derek had tried to make me choose between my principles and my career. Instead, I'd proven that the best revenge is doing things the right way and winning anyway.